So Canada just defeated Peru at the Copa America, winning 1-0 with a goal from Jonathan David in the 75th minute. So, what does that actually mean? Let's talk about it. Guys, welcome back to the Africans. We do primarily Canadian and African content because we're going to be the Africans and we're going to do so. So, guys, if you like the content, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all the good things. Turn on notifications, all the lovely things, and let us know what you thought about this game. Canada beating Peru 1-0. What does this mean? You know me, guys. I like to start off by you got to acknowledge the opponent. And that's the first thing we're going to talk about. Acknowledge who you played. Firstly, Peru. This is not the Peru of my younger days, but they are still a quality side. The Peruvian coach had a lot of interesting things to say about how this was going to be a physical game, and if they have to fight, they'd fight. That's a choice. I know there's a lot of things that were brought up in this game. It was a very physical game. I'll get to the refereeing later because I'm not one who complains about the refs a lot. But I think Peru showed that they were a feisty side, showed that they were a side that I think had Canada on the ropes in the first half. They were dominating possession. They were moving faster. Now, Peru looked good. There were a few things I know people will point to the first half. The headbutt that wasn't called a red. It should have been at least a yellow in my opinion. But no calls were taken, so we'll go from there. But yeah, Peru offered a feisty side, which was good for Canada, but you could see that they played well. They are a tough time. They've made the semis of the Copa America, I think the last two editions, so they're not an easy side to get through. They certainly played a style that really slowed the game down, and you could see if they had got that early goal that they were looking for, maybe then they would have just muddied up the game and kind of played. CONMEBOL is like a version of CONCACAF on steroids, I like to say. There's quality there, don't get me wrong, but once they get ahead, they will do what they can. They will fight for those wins. So I think Peru being an amazing side was good. It was a good challenge, and it was a good work for Canada. It was good to see them have to work through this. Again, we're still in an evaluation phase. There are things, even though I'm asking all the questions for Canada, but I think Peru was a formidable side to really test their mettle, their mental strength, and it was good. It was good to see how they were able to react. They didn't necessarily always go, but they had reactions and such. So Peru being a good side is not a surprise, and it's a good view to see what's happening. So Peru, good side, played feisty. The refs. Let's talk about the refs. You know me, guys. If you're new to the channel, this is something that I always say. I don't need the refs to be perfect, I just need them to be consistent. And boy, were these refs consistently bad. I'm not one to complain about the refs, again, but these refs from the first whistle were letting them play. And if that's the case, I put a post on X and that's truth. Hey, if that's the case, then be consistent that way. Don't all of a sudden if you're going to swallow your whistle, don't all of a sudden find your whistle and go. But then now you've set the precedent of what the game is. So I think the reffing being consistently bad is kind of good, but I think there are definitely problems and questions I would have with the quality of it. Again, this was a Guatemalan reffing crew, and then VAR and such was in a CONMEBOL team primarily. I mean, the two big VAR moments in this game were the headbutt on Alistair Johnson, which if you make contact with the head of someone, in any case, that's a red. Now, we've seen heavier calls called, we've seen lighter calls called. But if that happens, head-on-head contact is usually an automatic red. They didn't give that. And that's a question where, and I've made this comment, I think, watching the Canadian, when Canada played Argentina in a friendly before the World Cup. The ref sets the boundaries for the game. So if you're going to set them, then you can't be surprised if someone tries to push them, because if you're going to set them that wide, they'll try to do so. I think that's what happened. I think the reffing was very inconsistent and bad. At why I know some Canadian fans will complain and say it felt as if in the first half Canada was getting all the fouls and Peru could have done anything. I think it was slightly towards Peru, but there were non-calls on each side. I think there were non-calls on each side, so I wasn't necessarily upset up until that red card non-call. After that, it just turned into, what are we actually doing here? Then the second half, you see the red on Schaffelberg, where it studs up into the ankle. And again, if you aren't establishing, this is a conversation for refs, if you aren't establishing how the tone of the game, how you want the game to be played, it's going to get out of hand. Right? Now, did we reach a point where a fight broke out? No. Even though that's what the Peruvian coach was saying was going to happen. That being said, as the ref, you dictate the pace and the volume of the game. So for any young refs out there, you guys do that. You set the pace on what type of game you're going to let be seen. Now, speaking of the refs and other environments, we had an assistant ref collapse, and it does speak to, should the game have been played that early? I know you're trying to maximize the different time slots, get everyone able to watch a different game here and there, but I do think that you had a ref collapse. If that's a player, if that's another team, are you even playing that game? I know it's the middle of summer. It's a soccer-specific stadium. Copa America in America has had its issues, primarily laying grass on top of turf fields. And if that's a precursor for what's coming for the World Cup in 2 years, wow, I have questions. I hope that's not the solution. I pray and hope that's not the solution. That being said, there's a reality where it's just, okay, player safety, when does that chip in? Ref safety, where does that chip in? If you know you're going to be playing that quickly, are you taking enough hydration breaks? They took a hydration break, technically a cooling break, when Crepo went down after the first big save of the game. But as a ref, again, you have to be mindful of the game. You have to be mindful of the situation, the environment. Even if that means you're calling for cooling and hydration breaks, do so, because you lost an assistant ref, and that's tough. And I think you have to be mindful of that. You are playing in the summer, so in Kansas, so it's something to keep in mind. It's another thing to keep in mind, just primarily because you know the World Cup is coming here in 2 years, North America. So if you're making these mistakes here, yes, you're messing with someone else's tournament, but I'd rather you make these mistakes early and learn from them versus not. And this is a decent test run, small size enough, not too big, but it's an interesting one. Canada, I don't know. Again, guys, as you know, I'm not giving any type of real breakdowns on this team until we get to at least 6-7 games. By the way, we also got confirmed that Canada will be playing the US in that September window. It's same field, Mercy Field in Kansas City. I think that is where Sporting KC play. But when we look at Canada walk into this game, they only made one change to their lineup, bring in Richie Larea for Tejan Buchanan, which meant you pushed Alphonso Davies further up the pitch, and you had Richie behind him, and then Liam Miller on the opposite side playing there. I think when you go from a game that's going to be high in humidity, there were a lot of questions I saw from fans on X where they asking, is this team being pushed too much? Are they being worked too much in practice? I don't know, but I do think you have to keep in mind what the environment is. Now, there's a question, I think, for what we've seen with the side. It almost looks like when they get the ball sometimes. There's two issues, I think. I think their build-up is a bit too playing with the ball. They like to play with their foot too much. Their first touch has been abysmal. Now, maybe that's just a question of just you're already tired based off of training. It's already humid. They looked like they were running through cement in that first half. They looked like they were trying to run through mud. They looked tired. They had heavy legs. It looked as if you're seeing players who just all of a sudden, where one player's touch was great. Ismail Kone has looked different these last two games. Maybe it's the pressure of having scouts look at him. It was interesting to me. I made the Friday Night Lights reference in the last video where Ismail Kone is playing like Smash Williams when he got the recruiters from Oklahoma there to see him. Or was it Texas? I forget which one it is. That's a deep cut for y'all here. But Kone has not looked good here. Can he fix that? Yes. That comes into another point. We'll talk about how do you maybe tweak this team a bit. But their first touch was off. The other thing is, especially once you got to the second half, the first half, again, I think they played into Peru's hands. The first half, Peru was trying to almost speed them up and then get them into a back and forth. And then once they got the ball and really held on to it, then it was just Peru just moving the ball on switches. They were just faster. They were better they were winning the midfield. They were finding the overloads. They were getting the ball. The switches were crisp and good. They left Crepeau one-on-one with players candidate, and that's a bit of a problem. And that's where I kind of looked at it and said, Bombito, for as much potential he has, he's still raw. He gets caught looking, which is something we said about Kamal Miller for the last couple of years. He's a player who gets caught looking in those give-and-go situations. He gets beat more often than not. But you saw that they were just getting, their spacing was just off. Center backs were jumping too forward, but then the line wasn't jumping as well. That's what leads to that first major chance, and that's a bit of a concern. They did not look good in that first half. That being said, I think look at what they did in the second half, where you put on Schaffelberg for Liam Miller, and that's something I had asked for earlier. Instead of just, and this is going to spark the debate, I think Liam Miller versus Schaffelberg, I don't think it's a real question. I don't think that's the right question. I think the right question is, do we have the depth in that left and right attacking midfield winger type position? In a 4-2-2, that outside left midfielders, in a 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1, the wingers on each side, or a 3-4-3. I think that's something I started to look at the beginning of this tournament and asking myself, do we actually have depth there? Like, I remember listening to a lot of different Canadian content creators say, yeah, we have depth up there, we have more depth, we have cover. I don't know if we have that same depth, and that winger position to me is a position where you have a lot of people kind of in that same glut, that same level, where they can do the job in a specific spot. But this is the best competition we've played, which is something that wasn't really mentioned. This is the best competition Canada's played since the World Cup. Yes, that also includes a loss to Jamaica. But this is the best competition they've played since the World Cup in 2022, which means you can see where the leagues where someone is playing is different, or maybe different teams were up for it. Against Argentina, there were moments where you'd say, yeah, they held their own, and there are other moments where you said, yeah, I don't want to play the Messi breakaway challenge, so could we not do that, please, and thank you. In this game, they just looked like they weren't moving. They looked like they felt as if they could thread passes and then they would just reach them, versus players who are fighting for the ball. And this comes with playing bigger teams. You have to be up for this from the get-go, because they're going to push back. And I think that's a bit of my concern with them. It just, the last two games, in all four games, let's be honest, there are points where it just looked like they were being hemmed in. To use the Canadian analogy, it looked like they were on the PK, and there were points where on the power play, and they just had the ball. They were trying to take away, they're trying to defend, cut off lines and passes. The ball was still getting through. And I think that is a bit of a concern. It's gotten better, but against Peru, it was a bit of a concern. Not to say that Peru is some soft soap side. No, Peru is a quality side. But the defensive structure seems very inconsistent. The back line, you have center backs who are stepping up too early or trying to pressure and move, and once they get bypassed, now you leave a complete side open for opportunities for one-on-one chances with the keeper. So I think that needs work. When we get to that second half, right, I think what Schaffelberg provides you is, and it's still on that winger attacking with conversation, Schaffelberg, I think right now is your best super sub, and you keep him there. I think you hold it together, you maintain, maybe you get a lead, and then you bring in Schaffelberg to play direct. And that's, I think, the most interesting thing to me. For a system that requires so much movement, so much pressure, they seem so laissez-faire when they get the ball and they start to build up. Other than the goal that they had, which has just been created by Jacob Schaffelberg taking up space in the background. It's funny because you look at Tejan as a player who has pace. You look at Alphonso Davies as a player who has pace. And you ask yourself, well, why can't we get that from those players? Miller has pace as well. It may not be as fast. Larea has pace. But you look at those players and it's like, well, why can't we exploit that with our starters? Is it just that we're thinking too much? Is it that we aren't able to get those passes through, or are our passes not as crisp? Is it that the hold-up play is lacking, and because the hold-up play is lacking, we're now left in a position where the transition starts but then never really gets rolling, mainly because there's a turnover, because hold-up play isn't there, or they hold on the ball and try to take on with dribbles. Which, hey, every player wants to be able to do that. I get that as a dribbler. I was a goalie by nature, so it's not really a thing I would try to do. But it feels for as pressing and attacking as we assume a Marsh system would be, pressing, gegenpress, all that fun stuff. The players with pace seem to be the players who are the most hesitant to really let loose and burn. Right? They feel like that Canada they haven't reached the point where they're a luxury car, but they are a team. They're like that cousin that has a Mustang, but he never lets it rip. But then you get like that one uncle who's had a Mustang for 30 years. He hops in and then he just lets her rip and he rips it down the street. And you're like, okay, this is what this actually looks like properly. Which is where I think Schaffelberg works well. I think Schaffelberg is perfectly suited to be that super sub. I don't want him to start because the options of finding a spark off the bench are non-existent. Tejan is still finding his game and his legs. Outside of that, you're either turning to a Ali Ahmed or you're turning towards a Jonathan Osorio. Right? Liam Miller, I don't know if he can do that. We haven't seen him do it, but that's just the reality. So I think based off what the depth is, I will continue to say I think a low-key question are those wide spaces for Canada? I think fullbacks and wingers are outside midfielders. They are a concern. You need to get more players playing at a level, because if a player's not going, you're going to be tested with your depth, and if you have nothing there, that becomes a little bit problematic. Maybe it is as simple as just being more direct, and maybe that solves a lot of Canada's problems. But yeah, when you insert a player like Jacob Schaffelberg, he was just direct. He ate up the space on the side. His crosses were decent. No one was getting at the end of them. But I think that is how you have to approach it, which means, again, can you find an 11 who can get you to that 45, either still in the game or ahead? Because once you do that, then it's a conversation of ending the game. And I think Canada is suited for that. I think every game they're going to have to withstand some of that pressure, and then after that, it's once they withstand those first waves, can they then punish quickly, and then from there, then they can play more of that pressured space and pace type of a game where they want to go. Speaking of pace and space, pressuring, this is a question I'm always going to have, I think, right now, based off how they're playing. The question is, do you go 3 in the midfield or 2 up top? Right? I still think if you're going to be playing a pressing type of a system, I think the call is still having Joe David up top and then putting a third player in the midfield. Whether that means you turn to an Osorio as your additional presser, whether that's Mathieu Chouanière, whether that's a Ali Ahmed, along with Kone and Ustako, because I think right now Kone is struggling, and maybe having another player to play off of him takes a bit of the pressure off in the midfield trio. Kone is struggling. I would love to see what an Ali Ahmed looks like. I would love to see what a Mathieu Chouanière would look like. But I think Kone is struggling, and Larin is doing what Larin does, which is giving you a lot of opportunities but not getting them on frame. I think when you're in a tournament like this, you aren't going to have that many opportunities. I think Canada had 5 shots on target this game versus 9 that Peru have. You had 9 shots on target, and maybe 1 or 2 of them were Larin. And I think it's important to look at that. I think the way that the system is brought up, this will probably like the only tactical fit, I would say. And then you saw Marsh adjust this against Argentina, where you rotated more to a 3 in the midfield, so you had more of a 4-3-3 look. I think going out with a full-on 4-3-3, either pushing Kone further up the pitch or pushing one of the new faces, whether that's Ahmed Oshwania or you put the trusty old veteran of Jonathan Osorio there. I think that actually might suit better for pressing and what Marsh ultimately wants to do. And that might look good. I do have questions and concerns with the center backs. I'm not fully concerned. This isn't a red flag, but it's a flag. I think Bombito gets caught looking too much, and maybe that's something that he learns over time as he sees more game action and is able to adjust. I think on the counter, or whenever Peru was going, you did see him back up and give a lot of space for them to drive towards them, hoping that you had either one of your fullbacks or your midfielders able to track back and disrupt from the rear, which I understood, but the first times you see that, it's a little bit jarring. You're like, why are you giving them so much? Okay, I see what's going on here. Cornelius, I don't think he struggled, but Cornelius, I think, started to look heavy in terms of his legs. Again, this game was played in a lot of humidity in the middle of the day, and I think Marsh could have been better suited to rotate a little bit more. Maybe we get the same result, maybe we don't, but I think it would have suited a lot better to have rotated, and then you go back to your regulars in the second half, you give them a little bit of a breather and have them go from there. Maybe you don't have the results that you'd had before, but I think rotation would have been well suited and a well choice for Canada in this game. Ultimately, they get the goal. Congratulations, Jonathan David, on the first half. Gets the goal on his 50th cap. Happy to see him play well, but again, I think first touches by a lot of people were a little bit off, and I think when it turns to the build-up offensively, it's been lacking. This is probably their worst performance under Marsh, and again, it's only the fourth one, but they had a good half against the Netherlands, had a solid game against France, had a good half against Argentina, and had a good half against Peru after the red card. Now, granted, maybe they would have been able to continue to push and play more, but after the red card, I think it certainly opened up the pitch. You finally got Davies in space trying to send in crosses. We need a distributor. I said this after the last game. Sometimes it makes you feel like you miss a Junior Hoylett. And it makes the game and the options a little bit more interesting as what you could see and do. But overall, a good gutsy win from Canada. They were able to get 3 points, their first one at COPA ever. So congratulations for them, which means now they sit second in the group right now. They are -1 goal differential, with Argentina with +2 goal differential. Argentina playing Chile later on today, or yesterday, depending on when you're listening to, or a couple days ago, or you get the deal. Would I rate this performance? It's a tough 6 out of 10, just because you get the win, but I think there's a lot of room for improvement, especially in their build-up and their passing. Their touch was just, it felt very awful today, and maybe they're able to fix that as time goes through this tournament. They now have a big game against Chile on Saturday. Odds are winner of that group makes it through the group stage. And I think if all goes as we expect, I think Chile probably loses to Argentina, so a draw takes them on to the next round, which I think for Canadian fans, you'd be pretty excited with the possibility of moving over. So I'm very much curious to see what Canada does against now Chile. Both games will start at the same time: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. All 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock starts, so that we don't have any match fixing. But yes, guys, you let me know what you thought about Canada's performance here. I think we'll wrap it up here. But a good win, second in the group right now. Not the best performance, but getting the W. Hopefully something to build off of. But yeah, we'll wrap it up here. You guys let me know what you think.